Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the Acer Nitro 5 gaming laptop that features RTX 4060. It currently sells for under $1000, so let's see if it is worth the price. And we're also checking out a pretty cool cooling pad from Lano. Hit the like button and let's start. I got this laptop from Amazon for $950. It arrived surprisingly very fast, the packaging is pretty standard. In the box we have the laptop itself, charger and paperwork, which includes a quick start guide, tech support and warranty passport with stickers. Let's take a look at the laptop. Right off the bat I see a nice top panel design. It looks pretty stylish. The whole case is made of black plastic with a matte finish and it feels pretty good quality to the touch. The laptop also feels heavy, it weighs 5.5 pounds. So it's not the lightest laptop, but since it's a 15.6 inch, it is relatively portable. I see thick hinges, which is nice, and the screen angle is actually pretty flexible. It easily passes the one finger test as well. Port configuration is very simple here. On the left we have audio, USB and Ethernet ports. On the right it has two USB ports and power indication. And on the back we have HDMI, Type-C and power ports. You can also see cooling openings on each side. On the bottom, laptop has pretty thick rubber legs and cooling openings which are intake. For the charging we have a power cord and a 300 watts power adapter with a barrel jack. It is a pretty heavy charger, you can also see how thick the cables are, so it's not very portable. But the laptop supports charging through Type-C, so if you are on the go and don't need full performance, you can use much smaller charger. Let's power up the laptop. We have Windows 11 here. After the setup is done, I go straight to the settings to get over with the updates. It usually takes a while depending on how outdated everything is, but it's better to update everything right away. Once that was done, I updated the graphics drivers using NVIDIA GeForce Experience and it's ready. The laptop has a 144Hz Full HD screen and really nice viewing angles. The screen brightness is also pretty good. After using the system for a while, I can say it is very responsive. The touchpad on this laptop is surprisingly decent, but as always using a mouse will be more convenient. Speaking of the keyboard, it feels pretty good and doesn't bend anywhere. It has RGB backlight and you can control colors and modes through the Nitro Sense app, which is pre-installed. Let's now quickly go through the specs. On the board we have an Intel i7-12650H, a very nice and capable CPU. It has 10 cores, 16 threads, 4.7 GHz turbo clock and it has 24 MB of L3 cache. It is a pretty high-end and relatively new laptop CPU, so it should keep up pretty well. In Cinebench, CPU scored over 800 points, outperforming Ryzen 5800X, which is pretty impressive. The CPU also has integrated graphics, which by default is running Windows system. For the RAM, we have 16GB of DDR5 memory, which runs in dual channel at 4800 MHz frequency. For modern games and demanding applications, 16GB is becoming a standard, so having 16GB out of the box is pretty good. For the storage we have a 1TB SSD. Benchmark shows really good speeds and 1TB should be more than enough for most. Next we have a Wi-Fi 6 adapter, it works well. And finally NVIDIA RTX 4060 laptop GPU. It is a pretty capable GPU for high graphics 1080p gaming and content creation. It uses 8GB of VRAM and supports the latest DLSS free frame generation technology. In the Nitro Sense app I set the high performance mode and in 3D Mark, laptop scored over 10,000 points. During the benchmark, CPU and GPU temperatures stayed under 70 degrees for most part. Let's now jump in games, starting with low demanding online games. Valorant on high settings runs very smoothly with over 300 FPS most of the time. You can see the frame time graph also looks very good. In CS2 with the high settings, I see smooth around 180 FPS. And lowering the settings to low, aka competitive, will give you even better around 250 FPS. Moving to a pretty new online game, The Finals. On recommended settings, which is high settings with DLSS in auto mode, I'm getting very playable over 80 FPS, with some drops to around 65 in loaded scenes. With competitive settings, which are native 1080p, low medium settings, I see smooth over 90 FPS most of the time. In Fortnite, on the recommended preset, which is DirectX 12, epic settings and 72% render scale, getting frame time in range from 65 65 to 75 all the time. Overall, the game runs very smoothly and looks very nice. I tested the performance mode as well. The game looks much simpler now, but it runs with over 200 FPS all the time. The frame time graph also looks better. Next, PUBG. On ultra settings, the game runs at 100 FPS most of the time, with some drops to around 70 in loaded locations. I gotta say, I'm starting to understand people who play on ultra settings. The game looks pretty awesome. In Apex Legends, with the highest settings, I'm getting roughly around 150 FPS, and even with high settings like that, game runs pretty smoothly. I then switched to a competitive settings, and in that case getting around 170 FPS with some raises even to over 200 depending on location. Moving to Call of Duty Warzone, I see 70 to 100 FPS range with the recommended quality preset. The game is very playable and looks nice. For a more competitive frame rate, you can drop the settings to low, leaving the native 1080p render scale, and now the game runs at 100 plus FPS most of the time. You can see this laptop is good for any demanding online game. Some of you asked to test Rust, that's also not a problem for this laptop. On the auto set high settings, I see around 75 FPS. Let's now move to single player games. In Cyberpunk 2077, with the ray tracing ultra preset, I got 57 average FPS in the benchmark. The game looks great and runs smoothly. Depending on location, you can get higher or lower FPS. The minimum FPS I saw was around 45 in the Night City. But since we have the 40 series NVIDIA GPU, we can take advantage of the DLSS frame generation. So in the places where I was getting around 50 FPS, I'm now getting 85 plus FPS. You can see the frame time is also improved. In the benchmark, I also got a better average FPS. I'm really impressed with the frame generation. Getting that much extra FPS with one setting is nice, and the image quality looks absolutely the same. I can't tell any difference. Spider-Man Miles Morales also supports this feature. With very high settings, native 1080p, I see 80 plus FPS in relatively loaded Steam. That's pretty good, and with frame generation, I'm getting 130 plus FPS. Amazing result. Unfortunately, not all games support frame generation, so let's test a couple more single player games and then we'll talk about cooling. In Elden Ring, on maximum settings, I'm getting very stable 60 FPS even in loaded scenes. In God of War, with the ultra settings native 1080p, I see smooth 60 to 80 FPS range. You can see in demanding games like this one, CPU is hitting all the 80, sometimes even 90, and GPU all the 75 degrees. Overall, the laptop cooling works well and keeps the temperatures below critical. But if you want to help out your laptop with the cooling, I strongly recommend getting a cooling pad. This is a new RGB cooling pad from Lano, which they sent for review. In the box we have the power adapter, manual, extra dust filter, USB to USB Type-C cable, and the cooling pad itself. It has a very unique cooling design with a powerful 140mm fan in the center. On the side we have foam, which helps to create kind of a chamber between the cooling pad and the laptop. The intake is on the bottom. It has a dust filter, which is very nice to see in the cooling pad. You can also adjust the height of the cooling pad by folding the legs. On the front we have power and RGB touch buttons, along with the small display that shows fan speed and the scroll wheel which controls the fan speed from 300 to 2800 RPM. This is a very convenient design, I gotta say. And the RGB actually looks really good here. It has many modes and creates a nice gaming theme. Let's see how it performs. In 3D Mark, both CPU and GPU scored more points and the temperatures during the benchmark were noticeably lower. In games there is not much performance difference, but we are now getting better temperatures. So this cooling pad is definitely a great addition to a laptop setup. I really like that this cooling pad provides not only a better temperature but also dust protection, which is important in the long run. Back to our laptop, if you want to play on battery power, you can expect 30 FPS in games, which is playable, but you will drain the battery pretty fast. For example, I played 15 minutes of Apex Legends, which used 20% of the battery. But in tasks like browsing, you can expect around 4 hours from a full battery. So I think this laptop provides a fair performance for under $1,000. It will definitely not disappoint in games, and it's a pretty good tool for demanding productivity tasks. Let me know what you think about this laptop in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.